How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Dude, I don't think you realize what it means to me to have you on this show right now. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. I started college like a week ago, like 2 months ago actually.
Yeah?
It's crazy that I'm back in Los Angeles. It's like it's a different feeling.
Yeah.
Being back here. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
How is it? How's life on the East Coast?
It's very nice. Honestly, I was surprised. I thought the weather would be horrible. It's not bad at all.
It's not bad?
It's very random, honestly. It's like some days it's like 70 and the next day it'll be like 35.
Well,
So like, but other than that,
you getting used to the cold?
Definitely.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
It really worked out perfectly because Shmuel has been doing the last two episodes with me. And he was unavailable this week.
Oh wow, look at this.
And so I called his brother, called Isaac.
Oh really?
Yeah. And I was like, Isaac, like, do you want to do it with me? And he's like, no. And I'm like, dude, like, come on. He's like, no, I don't want to. I'm like, hey, fine, I understand. But he's like, you should call Ethan. I'm like, what do you mean Ethan's on the East Coast? He's like, no, he just flew in the other day. And I like, for me, you're the perfect person to do this with. So it's an honor to have you.
It's an honor to be here, honestly.
So why don't you tell everyone how old you are?
I am 21 years old.
21.
21.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And you are one of the most amazing 21-year-olds that I've ever met in my life.
Out here.
And I say this to you every time I see you.
Yes, and everyone else that we meet also.
What?
And everyone else that we meet also, you tell them.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
somehow.
because it's true. And like I've been saying this to you since you were like 19. If I had the maturity and the grace and the poise that you have at 19, God knows where I would be, where I'd be right now. So, kudos to you. You are amazing and you inspire me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So what are we doing here today?
We're talking about the Parsha, I think. That's the goal, right?
Yeah,
pretty sure.
I think this is the right term.
That's what I was told.
Who knows where this could go?
Who knows? Who knows?
The name of the Parsha is Shemini.
Shemini.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And so pretty much it covers 3 different things, to my understanding. The priestly service for the Kohanim, of which we're amongst the Kohen right now. Right?
Yeah, thankfully.
Then the second thing is the laws of kashrut, kosher, which is cool too.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a tough topic, honestly,
Uh-huh.
because the point of the podcast is really to just like encourage people to like just feel like they can have a connection with God and like learn the Torah and appreciate it without having to feel like they have to be like observant.
Uh-huh.
So like whenever we have a discussion in that, like again, if anyone like feels like that's not where they're at, teach their own. But yeah, so that's the second topic. Third topic is contamination, general spiritual contamination.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting topic.
Yeah.
But we're gonna try to tackle these.
Yeah.
What do you think?
People might think that spirituality, like physical spirituality, and like cleanliness, tuma and tahara, like in English, they're like I don't know how to explain tuma. It's like.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you asked that because I was reading in the commentary how there's actually 2 definitions. Mm-hmm. There's one definition, and it depends on the context, by the way. And so there's one definition for spiritual contamination. I guess that's one translation, and then the second definition is in the context of kosher foods, which is where when it says tuma, it means it's forbidden for you. Yeah. So it's not forbidden in the sense that it has spiritual contamination. It just means like it's forbidden for you.
Yeah, it's interesting how like I think we think of tuma and like tahara, like the literal translation is like what literally in like English, like tuma is like I don't know how do you explain it? Like in like literal translation, is it like how would ArtScroll translate it? I'm saying.
I'm not 100% sure.
Impurity. That's a good one. Yeah, exactly. Impurity and tahara would be like purity, pretty much. So it's interesting, like how we relate to that nowadays, right? Like we don't feel like okay, I touch something. Like what does that mean to be? I'm pure or pure. Like what does that mean? I don't know. It's like a concept's always like eluded me. I never like really understood it fully.
You really bring up a great point because I agree with you. It's hard to grasp of how something physical could transmit spiritual impurity. But going in, like reading about this week's parsha and like reading a lot of the articles and just um, sources that talk about it, I really don't think. I mean, I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist, but I really think the more we learn about science, um, the more stuff like this doesn't seem improbable, honestly. Because, I mean, first of all, we know that the things that, for example, like if someone is exposed to seeing like gory, graphic, I don't know, violence, for example, on a daily basis, they become desensitized to it. That's a physical thing you're witnessing. And I feel like it has an impact on your quote unquote soul. You stop feeling sensitive to those things.
Definitely.
Or even just someone who works in someone who's a divorce attorney, for example, or
totally.
someone who's a surgeon,
Yeah.
It has an impact on, I want to say spiritual, but just maybe even before going there, your mental, emotional perspective.
Totally.
No?
100%.
And okay, go.
How I like thought about it was like a little bit like COVID, like COVID, like you touch something and all of a sudden like you can get sick, right? It's like there's something there. It's like just how Atuma works and like how it's explained in like Talmud and everything is like there are levels. There's like a Avatuma is like a beginning, like the head, like if for example like someone that passes away, like touching that item, for example, for like a Kohen, right? It's a big deal. It's like we have certain laws like touching dead bodies or even like carrying a coffin or even being in a cemetery. It's like a big deal, for a Kohen. And it's like something that's just inside of that certain, like, I don't know, it could be like a cup, it could be water, it could be something that's, like even anything. It's still like widespread. It's like how I really thought about how I would see it in nowadays, like being mindful of everything you're doing. I can't even imagine, like, almost I think in Iran, for example, like both our parents, like our grandparents and everything, they were all grew up in Iran and everything. A couple of generations ago, I don't think it's too far removed. Like they were somewhat keeping these laws. Like I've heard like these like what's it called, and it's extremely interesting. Nowadays we haven't been keeping it nowadays, but it's like imagine having to like be careful of every single thing you touch, right? Every step you take, it's like a different world. I thought that was just like I don't know, just lesson like just being careful of where you're going, right? I can't imagine how it would be like to even think about doing that.
It's a huge responsibility. I can't imagine it either, but I really think that even if we're not at that level, because obviously some of this stuff is ideals and takes special people to really be at that level. But even if we're not, I'm sure there's, I could just, even based off what you're saying, there's something to be taken from that of just, am I mindful? We don't even have to talk about, because God commanded us and this and that.
Yeah.
Like, am I mindful of the things that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Just because we can go through life so rotely, and if there's no mindfulness in it, then we almost get swept up. We can get swept up in where life takes us without being active in going in a direction that we want to go.
Totally, 100% agree. And you can see yourself like, I don't know, like in a certain place that you are, and something to think about, like how did I even get to this area? Like how did I even get here? Like, and like how did it even happen? It doesn't make sense, right? And it'll happen to you, but like at a certain point, are you bringing yourself somewhere, or are you being like, just wandering around?
For sure,
right?
And it's interesting because all of this stuff is kind of just human nature.
Yeah.
We know that this is human nature. We know that we can, once something becomes a routine, or even if it's not a routine, a lot of things we could just end up doing them by just rote experience.
Totally.
and we know that that's just how we are. So it's not even necessarily something spiritual related.
Yeah.
But it's testament. It's important.
Totally. And like the mindful thing, like it's like I can feel it also. It's like the more you're mindful about like just everyday life, just like moving around, like just like what am I doing? Like, okay, what's like my next step? Like am I gonna like I don't know, buy this or this? Like am I gonna have this food or that food? Like am I gonna go ahead and like buy like what's it called? Like eating healthy or like not healthy? Like like just in that sense, it's like the more you're mindful about it, the easier it gets. Right? How I was like dieting and everything. It's like it's a whole deal. Like that's like the entire thing. It's just like what am I eating? Like I remember like a couple summers ago when I was like trying to like work out and everything and like try to get like strong and everything, and it was a big deal like what I ate. Like everything I need to be very careful with, like every single step I took. Because like I could ruin progress so quickly. I thought it was like whatever. Just like it gets so much a part of you almost once you're starting to keep mindful of it and everything. So I guess that could be how they did it. It's just like at a certain point, just like becomes, that's how life is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. That when we were talking about this last time, also of how consistency is important. It makes a difference. So I guess you bring a good point. Doing something regularly also can have benefits.
Yeah.
It just really goes to show everything is a balance. Really, because I mean, you see it in, for example, the prayers. When people go to pray, a lot of people's criticism is that, oh, you're just battling off these words and whatever. And you're right. If that's all you're doing, that's a problem. It's for all of us. You should be mindful in what you do. It shouldn't be rote, and it's easy. Consistency is good. Doing things on a consistent basis is great, but just becoming a mindless robot is also not good.
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Why, I don't know, but because that's what we're trying to figure out.
Exactly.
But what do I know?
Yeah. Yeah,
guy. Seriously. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I think when we start talking about kosher, we're going to start touching a lot about those things that we were talking about. But I thought maybe we'd start talking about, I forgot the context, so maybe you could point it out if you remember. I know at the beginning of the parsha, it uses this word vayehi, which means it was. I forgot what context they were talking about it, but anyway, this word vayehi, usually they see it always comes up in the context of indicating trouble or grief. And this is supposed to be, well, I guess we didn't really explain it. So the beginning of the parsha talks about the priestly service, which is the Kohen Gadol and the Kohanim, which one of my big questions was, why do we even need the Kohanim?
I need them. Oh, the parsha says it.
Yeah?
Parsha says. They're supposed to be the people that are, I mean, I don't want to say this. I'm a Kohen. I'm a little biased. But, but it says in Perek Yud, Tet, 11 actually, yeah. So 10, 11 in Vayikra, and to teach the children of Israel all of the decrees that Hashem had spoken to them through Moses. And that's like the Kohen's job. Like we're like the teachers, like the heads of the nation, like the leaders supposed to be, like we're emissaries of like Hashem's like light in this world. Like that's all Jews, but I'm saying Kohanim are like the people that are bringing the korbanot. They're bringing things for the people. Like our entire lives are like supposed to be centered around the nation.
Yeah, I feel you, but to challenge that, I still it makes me wonder. I ask myself, okay, fine, all those things you said, fine, but it makes me wonder, why should there be a separate set of people that are quote unquote Kohanim that that are quote unquote priestly? I find it interesting. I think it's a valid question. Say, why do we need them? Why do we need these emissaries? Because maybe sometimes people are like, first of all, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it from the perspective of, oh wow, like why do they get to be the priests of the nation? and we're just average Jews,
Uh-huh.
you know? Or you could look at it as, wow, that's a lot of responsibility. I don't know if I want that,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Yeah, totally.
But it's funny because right before you came, I was reading about the Parsha, or I was reading some articles, and I feel like I came across a pretty interesting answer of how the Kohanim are kind of a representative of the constraints of law and ritual that is necessary, and this juxtaposition to just letting your emotions control your service, your passion. I want to say to God, but even if that's not where you're at, you know, we all have a desire for spiritual connection. We all have a desire for spiritual meaning. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you see it. Everyone, even if you're not finding it through Judaism, we're all looking at it through different avenues. People are listening to Eckhart Tolle. You know, I don't know who else. I've been reading like Taoism and Thich Nhat Hanh, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. But,
I don't know.
You know, which I mean, I'm sure some of these, like I've read some of these texts and stuff. I mean, they don't not have value, but my point is that everyone has a desire for spiritual connection, you know, but there has to be, and I mean, we'll talk about this more. I don't want to jump the gun, but yeah, it seems like that they could represent that necessity for a basis of ritual and laws and customs, so as to not allow your emotions to dictate your spiritual efforts entirely.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. I think, like, again, as you said, all people needed some sort of like connection to, like, I think not even like a spiritual existence, but also like a feeling of being part of like a team. You know, it's like for us, like we feel like we're all part of a team, right? It's like you see someone on the street, it's like Jewish or something, or like you see someone like part of like your basketball team, like, you know, like Laker fan or something like that, like in Los Angeles at least. Sorry for all the Clipper fans, but you a Clipper fan?
I know, but
right,
I'm not that big on basketball anyway. But if I had to choose a team, it'd probably be Lakers.
Okay, fine,
but it's just arbitrary, honestly.
Yeah, I guess fair. Yeah, but like when you see someone like, you know, like wearing a Kobe jersey, or like wearing like whatever like person jersey on the team, it's like, you know, you feel like a certain connection to them. You know, like even right off the bat, it's like I'm in like an elevator with somebody, and like they're suddenly like they're wearing a jersey, like a Laker jersey, or like they're wearing a kippah, like I suddenly have something to talk about. Yeah. You know, it's like right away. You know, and that's like a part of the connection. You feel like part of like a spiritual connection. It's also a connection with other people. You know, like it's a very like all-encompassing kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, back to what we were talking about. This word. So it's a joyous day, right? In the Kohanim, it's the inauguration of their initiating their service.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be this fantastic day. They built it's called the tabernacle, right? And this is supposed to be the method of Jews connecting with God.
Yeah.
Or the most important method, because there's many ways. But yeah, so this word vayehi indicates troubling grief. So why on such a joyous day it uses this word? And so Sforno, who I don't know who that is, but it just sounds like he's a very important person. Yeah. Do you know who that is?
He's one of the he's a great commentary on the Torah.
Yeah. He's one of the important commentators,
definitely.
right? Yeah. So he says that and I find this very interesting, that until the sin of the golden calf, there was no need for a, quote, center of holiness. Every Jew was worthy of the divine presence. But after the sin of the golden calf, the tabernacle was necessary for the resting place of the Shekhinah, which is the divine presence.
Yeah.
So it's sad. There's this sadness because it's mixed the joy. Sorry, it's sadness and joy mixed with the realization of this even greater level of holiness that was forfeited. And I was thinking about, what does that tell us? What message can we take away from that today? How does that relate to us today? I just find it so interesting that there didn't need to be this, service and this process and these offerings and stuff like that. And it just really goes to show that people who maybe want to sometimes look at the Torah and think, or even myself sometimes think, oh, how does this relate to us? What are these practices and whatever? We weren't even supposed to have these practices. These practices are a result of our shortcoming, as like our flaws as humans, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. We're innate, like, to say that I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, we're innately flawed. That doesn't mean we should have low self-esteem and feel like we're worthless.
I think it's a reason to be happy. I like, part of what I think myself, like, thank Hashem for, is like being flawed. Like the fact that I'm able to grow and become like a better person. Like, I'm not like an angel or whatever. It's like, it's a big deal. Like, it's nothing to take for granted.
How so? How?
I think, I don't know, just being like, how boring would life be if I was just perfect? Like, whatever. I couldn't like relate to people. I couldn't, like, whatever. Everyone's like perfectly fine. I was gonna mention this also later on, but about the Kohanim, like the ability to like teach people. It's like also the ability to help others. Like, that's a huge part of personal growth. Like, without the ability to help others, like, if everyone was perfect, there would be no helping others. It wouldn't, like, what would life even be like? Right? It wouldn't even feel like the same thing. I don't even know how to imagine it. Right? I think it's a big deal that we have the ability to help other people, and that's only because of our shortcomings that we're able to do that.
Yeah. I think it also helps. I think it also opens the door for you being helped.
Yeah. Totally.
Which is so important. I found in life that true growth, true progress can only be done with the help of the other people. We first of all, we can't do everything if we wanted to. Second of all, it's totally inefficient to try to. You move at a snail's pace. All the most successful people. There are a lot of people who had an impact on the world, but didn't have as great of an impact because they worked by themselves. And the most successful people are the ones who utilized others, brought people together who they had the vision of, like, this person is going to work really well with this person, and we need all these elements combined. So I think you make a really good point.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's impossible. We can't, like, do things on our own. Like, I think sometimes when we're like taking, we're really giving to the other person. It's a big deal. It's like, for example, I've always heard like this thing of, like, for example, giving charity, right? Like, you think you're giving them everything, but really they're also giving you. How
so?
I think just mentally, I'm able to do something nice for somebody else. I'm showing myself, like, what kind of person I am, establishing myself as a person. I have a higher self-esteem because I know, like, I'm not just some selfish person that's just going around and just taking. I'm also able to give, and it's like a superpower that I have. It's no small thing. It's a big deal. Every little, as I said before, also, like, every little thing is like leading you on and on and on, making it easier and easier for you to do greater and greater things.
That's such a good way to put it. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Nice. So, okay, so we talked about that. And then, so there's also a big part of this week's parsha is the sons of Aaron, right? Nadav and Avihu.
My cousins.
My
cousins.
Your cousins, exactly. This week's parsha is really, it's kind of complicated. It's hard to navigate because there's a lot of unknown and a lot of things that on the surface you feel like, how could that be? How could this be a thing? So pretty much what happened with Nadav and Avihu was that this is like the pinnacle of joy, the inauguration of the priestly service, and everyone's on cloud nine. All the Jewish people, everyone's just super excited. Everyone's really happy, right? And what happens? Nadav and Avihu die. They die, and they were pretty much killed by God, which is tough to say. It's tough to say because I feel like that's one of the things. Excuse me. It's one of the things that you look at it and you're like, well, how could God do something like this? Mm-hmm. What kind of God is this? Just kill somebody, or kills two people, it raises questions.
Yeah, totally. I think also the context of like how it happened is very important. Like, like they came into the tabernacle and like there are some different opinions. I think you want to get into this also. Probably were. I should probably cut you off.
No. So why don't you tell us what happened?
So I think beginning of it at least, like they were again, everyone's like on this cloud nine, like, totally everyone's happy, and then all of a sudden, like it says that the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, each took his fire pen. They put a fire in them and placed incense upon it, and they brought up before Hashem an alien fire that He had not commanded them. And it's interesting because it's kind of like what you were saying. The whole segue behind this whole Mishkan is like the tabernacle is the golden calf, right? It's the whole thing behind it, and it's a very like similar thing. I think to what Nadav and Abihu are doing, right? They're bringing like their own like korban, there's their own sacrifice, their own offering. Sorry,
no
offering.
I could tell you listen to last week's podcast.
Exactly, an offering, and so I think it's very interesting. Like it's a very big parallel. I know I was noticing also because how I always understood like the golden calf and how it happened was like, it wasn't just like, oh, like they were just serving this like cow now, like that I don't think that's what happened. It was also like obviously a lot of like different parts that came into that. But also how I understood it. One of someone I spoke to was that what used to happen was there used to be like an idol. There was a certain idol that was prevalent in those days. I think it's in some museums actually, that had like a golden calf and then like an idol on top of it, right? And that golden calf that's explained in like the Chumash, like the Torah, is just a golden calf, right? There's nothing on top of it, right? And so how I understood it was like there's a golden calf there, but they're really praying to Hashem on the golden calf, right? They were really trying to pray to that thing above, which is like Hashem, but they were trying to have like an emissary. So they needed. At that point, like Moshe had gone up to the mountain, and like they were kind of like in the state of doubt. And so now they had this like golden calf there. They thought they had like some sort of emissary toward God, like to God. And it's interesting to see like the parallels between that and also like the in the tabernacle there was like in like the holiest of holies, right? And there we had like this the cherubim, these two like angel type things that have wings, and they're facing toward each other. And in between them, right, the Aron HaKodesh was there, what's Aron HaKodesh in English?
The Ark.
The Ark, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in between the Ark,
right? Of the Covenant.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, exactly. Nice.
Sounds like an Indiana Jones movie.
Exactly. I think a movie actually. So at the bottom we had the tablets at the bottom, and then they had the cherubim on top, like the two angels, and from in between the two angels, like the two like pictures of children, pretty much. So like one could even say like these two pictures of like these two children, right? In between them was where Hashem would talk to Moshe. The Shekhinah would like most intensely be back there, pretty much, like where all of Moshe's speakings and everything to Hashem would happen once the Mishkan was up. Those are two images, like they're like one could even like I don't know if you saw them outside, like someone could even mistake them for an Avodah Zarah, like some like idol worship. But the major thing was that they had like the tablets at the bottom. It was with the mindfulness of like there's the respect to the Torah on the bottom, and that was the basis for it. And then from there you could have your connection to Hashem, right? So it's funny that not even was that the actual like sin of the golden calf could have been the golden calf itself. It could have been that it didn't have a basis under it, like a respect for what they were getting at that moment. They were at Har Sinai right there, and they had just heard God, and so the basis had to be at that point. It should have been that the ark, or what's it called, that connection, right there. But that was the problem. And so same thing over here with Navihu, right? It's like they're just going in there at this point where everyone's like so happy and they're all ready to, be able to do the words of God and everything. And all of a sudden, like they go in there and are doing their own thing.
So let's explain what happened pretty much. So they're doing the service, right? And like we said, it's this like very, very joyous, like pinnacle of joy moment. And I'll read the quote. It says, the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan. They put fire in them and placed incense upon it. And they brought before God an alien fire that he had not commanded them. So that's what they did, right? And I feel like one of the things you touched on and when you were talking about the covenant and having Torah as the basis. So like you were explaining, it seems like there's a connection here that it says that they brought an alien fire. And then right after this, it says how God kind of took their life. And so a lot of interpretations, like first of all, there's like potential reasons that they said of why this happened to them. The first reason was that they entered the tabernacle, the Mishkan, either drunk or with, so that's one of the first interpretations. They entered drunk. The second reason is that the potential reason is that they did not defer the honor of bringing this fire to their father, Aaron. Another potential reason is that they did not consult with Moses prior to bringing the fire. So how does this relate to what you were saying? Pretty much, there's this notion that they were overtaken by emotion. And then directly after this, it talks about how directly after this happens, it says in the Torah, explicitly, don't do the services intoxicated. So a lot of people interpret that as that's one of the reasons, the fact that it said this right after, is that's one of the reasons why they were punished. So I feel like on the surface level, you could be like, wow, like what's the big deal? Why are we making this such a big deal? But to touch on what we were talking about, it really shows that if it raises this question of, in my opinion, and I feel like one of the reasons how it really relates to today is this idea of, oh, I'm gonna connect through God through mushrooms, or you know what I mean? I'm gonna connect through God in my own way. I'm gonna, I don't need this structure, and I'm just gonna do my own thing and whatever. And that kind of seems like what they did. That kind of seems what's going on here. Either whether you want to look at it from the perspective of intoxication, which you could relate to like any intoxicant, or them doing it their own way, not like flouting the rules and the processes, and just being like, but even that was from being overtaken by emotion,
Yeah.
So I just think that let's like unpack this whole thing about, like, for example, like psychedelics. I feel like today, I don't know how much you follow it, but I feel like today you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
You're like, what you hear articles all the time. Wow, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, these are godsend cures to depression, godsend cures to, being connected to just elevating yourself and so on and so forth, right? But I don't know. I think there's something to be said that although it can, I'm sure you can have elevated experiences, I think that it could be problematic for multiple reasons. First of all, I just want to cite that with psychedelics, I delved into a lot of the studies, that back up this notion that psychedelics is like the cure to depression and so on and so forth. And I'd say the vast majority of them, or almost every single one that I found, it was all in conjunction with therapy, which I found so interesting because you never hear that. It's all like, oh, this person took mushrooms and they're like not depressed for a year. Like, amazing. I'm gonna go do mushrooms tomorrow. What's the problem? You know what I mean? Like, but every single one of them were like in conjunction with psychotherapy, which is unbelievable, if you ask me.
Makes total sense. I think it's without guidance, like anything is very scary. Forget about your like using drugs or not using drugs or like psychedelics, not psychedelics. Like, regardless, that help is needed. Like you're not gonna just have a fix like that. It's not. It's just. I can't imagine that happening for like a problem that's so like deeply rooted in a person, or like even like just like a certain like difficulty that person's going through, right? Like it's nothing will ever take it away like that, right? So that's, I guess, just that idea by itself makes it very hard for me to believe that this stuff is like, oh, go ahead. What you're making makes total sense. That it would be in conjunction with any help, Like, and it could be both working together. That could be totally possible. I don't know the science behind it. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in the field, but not yet. But, but yeah, I totally see how that could work.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the things you just said actually, which was very interesting, was that it could be both. And I think, well, it's interesting because I didn't even realize this until right now, but it's one of the things that I want to talk about was that where should intense spiritual experiences come from, And I was reading a lot on this, and pretty much it's, from what I read, there's this notion of relying on emotion versus meticulous care to express that emotion, and there should really be a blending of the two. And it really seems like, it's crazy, I didn't even think about it, but it really seems like, doing mushrooms and then getting therapy is kind of a blending of the two. Therapy is like this structured kind of thing, and then mushrooms are this kind of like intense, like emotional experience. So I guess the moral of the story is, let's just end this podcast and go do some mushrooms.
Good idea. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever tried it?
I have not tried it.
Me neither.
No, I have good friends that tried it though.
Okay, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them might be mutual. Yeah, no, I never tried it either. But I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. But on that same point, I think that whole thing of like two things working together, like the unstructured and the structured working together, it seems to be like a theme throughout, I think, Judaism. I think, like, for example, like in prayer, for example, like that's exactly the point, like within the boundaries of like, saying the same thing every day and with everyone, it's not just that, it's that I get to express myself because my thoughts. For example, there are certain points in tefillah where, in like prayer, where you're allowed to like add stuff in yourself, right? Like even in English, like it's, a lot of people don't know about this necessarily, but if you spoke to like somebody, they would tell you like it's a very personal experience. I remember, for example, like I got to be in Israel for about a year and a half studying in yeshiva, and
what's yeshiva?
Oh, yeshiva is like how would I explain it? I guess I got to sit.
It's learning, pretty much.
Yeah, it's learning about Judaism. That's the best.
It's pretty much a university for studying Torah.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine like being able to be soaked in that for about a year or a year and a half. It was just something that, I don't know, it was an experience that I was so lucky to have. Not everyone gets that experience, and it's understandable. It's not like the experience everyone gets to have. But
so, what do you feel like it did? What do you feel like it does for you?
What did it did for me? Oh, I think just personal growth wise. I think that just refining my character, or finding what I wanted for my life, like how I wanted to like just act on a daily basis. Like how I wanted to raise my children, my family eventually, hopefully. Everything got changed in terms of like what kind of like a meaningful perspective. Like it wasn't like And before that, I was like a kid. I didn't like have like any idea of like what I was thinking about, like any future, like what I wasn't thinking about it. Like, it was like finally go to college and like go ahead and go on with my life. But I think in terms of being mindful, like we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, was a big change, big change in terms of being mindful of my actions. So yeah, but one experience that I had was that I was actually in Meron.
What is that?
It's like a certain mountain in like central or actually northern Israel. And on the 33rd of the day of the Omer, which is like from the second day of Pesach, we start counting the Omer. And on the 33rd day, a ton of like 800,000 people all go to this one place in Israel, and they're like, it's like a big celebration. It's like we're all dancing, and everyone's very happy. And that year, actually, there was a tragedy there. A lot of like some benches had collapsed, and some people, unfortunately, had passed away. But like I was literally there while that was all happening. Seeing cars going down up the hill, like everything happening. It was crazy experience. But after the whole tragedy happened, I had the ability to go to a different city called Sfat, I think it's called in English. In also northern Israel. And that night I just remember it was like in the air. You could really feel like the whole city was like kind of like mourning over this kind of loss that we all had. The city is like right next to the hill, like it's like right there. It's only like a 20-minute drive. And just it was literally like a heavy setting. And that night it was Friday night, and I had gone with a couple of my friends to this synagogue nearby. And I just remember we were sitting there with everybody, like standing and like just singing for about 2 hours, like just getting out these emotions that we all had from the day before and everything. It was a crazy experience. But what was the main like point of that was also like the tefillah that we had, like the prayer that we had done that night also. That was an extremely important part, because in that moment when you're there and you have this text, it's like at that moment the text isn't like a boundary, it's not a guideline anymore. It's just like it's exactly how I want to express myself. It was a very weird thing how that happened. Like you always think, like how I always relate to it is like, like just in like say daily and like okay, but like at that moment I had like really felt that change. It was like a sense of like this is definitely how I wanted to express it in that moment.
So you felt like the text like adopted a new meaning for you, where you really saw how even just the text itself really maybe was such a powerful conduit for expressing your emotion. Yeah. Whereas maybe before you felt like it wasn't so much of a...
And before I hadn't really understood, like, I guess, like, the meaning behind it fully. Like, I still don't understand it fully. It's a very, like, deep prayer, I think, we say every day. There's so much to learn about it. But at that moment, I think I understood that, like, as you said, it's like a conduit, right? It's like, sometimes I don't have all the abilities to, like, be able to express myself in the correct way, or, like, how I'm really feeling, or everything like that. I think through having structure, you can get yourself to have no structure. Does that make sense? Through the structure, you're able to also, like, put in your own feelings.
I mean, it totally makes sense what you're saying. I mean, because, for example, when you first start playing guitar, when you first start playing piano, any instrument, you're not going to start channeling, just Jimi Hendrix level, riffs and stuff like that. You have to master the basics first. And that takes consistency, that takes practice. And so I feel like what you're saying is that through the structure, you kind of find your own expression eventually.
Totally. And the basics, like as you said, like the piano, for example, like the basics you have in the beginning, stick with you the entire time. Right? Like you're never going off the basics. And if you fall off the basics, like I at least for me, like you can feel like it's something wrong. Yeah. Like in piano, for example, like like if you're like falling off, like your finger placement is wrong, like that's a basic thing that you need to have.
So pretty much you're saying your your personal expression is an extension of the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And I feel like that makes a lot of sense, because if you go straight to the personal expression, maybe you're expressing yourself, but I don't know if you're going to expressing yourself very well.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to a piano recital with someone who doesn't know how to play piano, and it's just like channeling. It's like,
yeah, they're totally into it. They're like,
maybe you're letting it all out, but it's clearly missing something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
This is great, honestly. Yeah. These are perspectives I haven't even thought about. So
neither.
I think it's just really a testament. And I think it goes to show the importance of structure, but it's not the end all be all. You need the emotion, you need your passion, but it has to be a marriage. It has to be a connection between these two. I have some quotes. I at first I was like very hesitant to like read off certain things, but I just feel like certain things that I've read are just like so perfectly put, like why change it. So for example, I was reading out some of the quotes I was reading from the articles was, for example, when one relies on his emotions alone in determining his path to God, then each person creates his own path, and the service of God is fragmented into many diverse molds, which is a contradiction to God's oneness. That's obviously a lot. But I think the main takeaway is that this idea that we're talking about, and I feel like it's one of the what we just read is one of the main reasons why we shouldn't just end this podcast and go do mushrooms, because there has to be some sort of unity in it. Otherwise we see like it just becomes fragmented and there is no unity, and then also when it's so intense, I feel like this is another thing. Are you in control when you're drunk? Are you in control when you're high? Are you in control when you're on mushrooms? I've never done it, but I'm assuming not. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, and I feel like it's a testament to your heightened physical senses and just being invested so much, or overly invested emotionally.
Yeah.
What do you
think? So too. And I think just like on that same thing of like overinvesting in emotion, it's like a scary thing sometimes. When like you feel like your emotions are getting the best of you. For example, anger is like a big deal. Like like how you feel when you're angry, or like how a person's angry. I know you don't get angry, but when I get angry,
just have a conversation with my mom.
Yeah, like anger is the perfect example of this. I think like getting your emotions invested in you. Like it's almost impossible. Like it takes a lot of self-control and working with yourself and being mindful of it to like get out of this, mindset at that moment when you're getting angry at something. And like it could be a very good reason, but still, like, is it really the best thing in that moment to be angry? And it's you never want your emotions to take control over you.
For sure.
I think you never want that. It's a scary thing.
And your emotions are so inconsistent.
Yeah.
They vary from person to person, and they vary day by day. I feel like there has to be some sort of structure. There has to be. We can't just rely on our emotions.
Yeah.
They're just not consistent enough. Mm-hmm. And that goes with any aspect of your life.
Yeah, totally. Again, a person that has their emotions controlling them like their entire lives, like imagine that. Like I wouldn't want to be around that person. Like I wouldn't.
Yeah.
It'd be like a scary thing. Like like for example, like when someone's high and someone's sober. Like when those two people are together, it's like, how does a person that's sober feel at that moment? Like either they feel left out because like they weren't able to do whatever, like they're a designated driver or whatever it is, or they're feeling like, what are they doing? Like what's even happening here? Like what's like they can't even connect to that. It's like to just like a baseline level of being able to connect to people. Like it's difficult when like all you're doing is like just emotion, putting that in.
Which is to say, like I think it's important to emphasize that I don't think either of us are advocating to not like engage in your emotions,
no,
or even to not like
that works for the worst people.
Yeah, or even not to like enjoy a drink here and there. But there's balance.
Yeah, totally.
Really, because neither of us, and I know for sure Judaism does not advocate abstinence from intoxicating substances. I don't know about all intoxicating substances, but but is it for the right purpose, and is it in moderation? Are we? You don't want to lose control.
Timing, everything. It's very like I don't want to say like a sacred thing, like it's like an important thing, like being able to like drink and be in like a safe environment, in the right place and everything. It's a big deal. If you're like in the wrong place and you're like drunk, like I don't know. It's again, like for me, it's like a scary thing, like being in the wrong place. It's all about like people around you also. Remember, it's like a lot goes into this like situation for like when I'm gonna drink, when I'm not gonna drink. Yeah, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? It's a thing to be mindful of.
For sure. I feel like there's so much to be said about this concept of not just purely going based off your emotions. I think another one of the reasons, just to touch on it really quickly, is that life is already so, I don't want to say difficult, but just for lack of better words, like difficult as it is. We have so many things, especially in today's day and age, drawing our attention, and not only drawing our attention, kind of attracting piquing our emotional senses, and so I just can't imagine. It just seems such an inefficient way to go about life, to just constantly be going based off your emotions, because one day you might feel connected to Hinduism, and then the next day you might feel connected to Buddhism, and then the next day you might feel connected to Eckhart Tolle, and it's so easy to just kind of get drawn by whatever feels right in the moment or in that period of your life, and then we're not that old. I'm older than you, but I can imagine, and you hear it from people, like next thing you know, you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and you're like, what did I do? Where did everything go?
Totally.
And you see there's not any progress. So what's the point of all this? There's value. There's value here. We're not, if you're not on that, if it's not something that you see is a part of your life right now, to be, I don't know, a rabbi, or be extremely strict, fine, even if that's a whole other discussion, whether that's for you or not for you or whatever, but my point is, and I think our point is, that there's value here. There's value to having some sort of consistency, even if you're not fully kosher, if you're not shomer Shabbat, there's value to, there's something that to value here, and to respect, and to appreciate, and not take for granted.
Totally, everything's a process. Everything is like your connection. It's all a process. Everything, you're always growing, always trying to get better and better and better in everything you do. Like, forget about like what it is. Everyone's trying to get better.
For sure.
It's a never-ending process, and that's part of what we were saying before about being like a non-flawless individual. Like, I'm very flawed, and I have certain things like selflessness, or like whatever, different aspects of our own being. It's different for each person. It's very important to be able to work on those things in the structure, right? And so, definitely, it's definitely important.
Yeah. I remember. Have you heard the show Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yes.
So, I remember one time I was thinking about the name of the show, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, what a weird name for a show. I feel like, because it's become such a ubiquitous thing, and I feel like you see this a lot, where certain phrases and whatever words kind of they're so ubiquitous that you stop seeing them for what they are. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's one of, it's too much curb your enthusiasm, whatever. But I was thinking about, what is that, like, curb your enthusiasm? And I was contemplating it, and if you think about it, it's the funniest thing. And more than that, I really think it's one of the keys to life. Uh-huh. I really think so. Of curbing think about what that means, to curb your enthusiasm. Uh-huh. It's
the entire show. And so,
Yeah.
It's like this is like once you're mentioning it, it's like I totally feel that. Now that I'm like going back and like thinking about the show and everything, like it's exactly what his entire point is. That the entire show, it's like curb that enthusiasm. Like that would be too much, you know?
Yeah, and the dangers of it. It's so interesting that I feel like even sometimes your joy, you know, because we don't have to take things to such an extreme, you know. Even and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but even your joy, you know, I found sometimes that like even in your joyous moments, if you kind of take a step back and you're like, all right, this is a great moment. I'm enjoying myself. I'm 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 feeling good, whatever. But I'm not gonna take it too far, you know. And I this is something that I really had to work on in my own life, you know. It's something that I suffered with, like when I was joyous, I was always like, okay, or like I was having a really great day. I'm like, okay, like perfect, you know. And I would take it too far. I would be like, oh, okay, so like I'm having such a good day, I could just put off my responsibilities. I could just whatever, you know, like it's all good. I get too invested in my joy, you know. And the same way you might get too invested in your sorrow, you know.
Yeah, totally.
And it really reminds me of I don't know, I don't remember if it was King David or King Shlomo who had a ring, and on his ring it said, "This too shall pass."
It's one of the, I think it was King Shlomo.
You think it was King Shlomo?
I believe so. I forgot.
But anyway, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because they say he's the wisest man to ever live. But the reason he had the ring was that it was meant to serve as a reminder in the good times and the bad times. That when he was a good time to remind himself that like, okay, like this moment is also gonna pass. Like tougher days are gonna be ahead of me. So let me chill a little bit, you know, like let me not get overwhelmed and not be clouded by that moment. And then also like a bad moment, you know, this too shall pass. It's not one of the biggest things that I learned in my life is that if I'm having like a really bad day, I think back to other really bad days that I've had, and I'm like, did I have good days after that bad day? And 100% of the time, the answer is yes. You know, and so I don't get enveloped in the moment, you know, and I really I think it goes to show. And the reason I brought this whole thing up about curb your enthusiasm is because actually Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, which I'm sure you know who that is, but for the people who don't know, he was the chief rabbi of England. He actually passed away a few years ago. Yeah. But he's one of the most amazing speakers, in my opinion, and writers, because he explains things in such a simple, relatable way. I was devastated when he passed away. I couldn't believe it, and they didn't tell anyone that he was even suffering from an illness, and they just announced that he passed away out of nowhere, and it was a lot. But do you mind if I read off some of the stuff he said? Really
please. Just one thing that when I was a kid, actually, he came to our school.
No way.
Yeah, he came to our school for what's it called? For the I remember. I'm remembering now. Yeah.
Which school?
Markham Hill Hebrew Academy.
No way. So like middle schoolers.
Yeah, middle schoolers. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Long time ago. But yeah, I remember this. It was a big deal in our school. Huge deal.
I mean, it is a huge deal. Yeah. He's incredible. He's a huge figure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. But it's interesting because he has an article from this week's Parsha that it's like all relating to enthusiasm. And I just, again, like I'm not a fan of just reading off, but he just says it so well that I would be doing a disservice to just try to say it in my own words. But he says enthusiasm is the opposite. It is the result of overconfidence. The enthusiast, in a state of high religious rapture, comes to believe that he is being inspired by God himself and is thus empowered to disregard reason and restraint. And it's really amazing because he connects it to like secular thinkers and stuff too. And so he was referencing this person Hume, and he says, rules and regulations, thinks the enthusiast, are for ordinary people, not for us. We, inspired by God, know better. And that, said Hume, can be very dangerous indeed. And it just goes to show that you see it so much of just this like, oh, we're channeling God, we're so into this and whatever, but there could be almost like an overconfidence, an ego in that,
Totally.
And I think that also speaks, which what Rabbi Sachs was talking about, it speaks to why we need the Kohanim, because he was saying priests understand the power and thus the potential danger of the sacred. This is why holy places, times, and rituals must be guarded with rules, the way a nuclear power station must be protected by the most careful insulation. So you cite Fukushima and Chernobyl as examples. And then he goes on to say, to bring an unauthorized fire to the tabernacle might seem like a small offense, but a single unauthorized act in the realm of the holy causes a breach in the laws around the sacred that can grow in time to a gaping hole. Enthusiasm, harmless though it might be in some of its manifestations, can quickly become extremism, fanaticism, and religiously motivated violence. And he talks about how this is what happened in Europe during the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century. And then he quotes David Hume, where he says, human reason and even morality are rejected by enthusiasts as fallacious guides, and the fanatic madman delivers himself over blindly to what he believes to be divine inspiration, but what may in fact be overheated self-importance or frenzied rage. And I just think that's amazing, and I think it touches to another point that when we kind of touched on it earlier, when you stray in your own, based off like your own inspirations and not according to like a certain structure, it might seem like a small thing in the moment, but that can lead, like, slowly but slowly, if that's the example you're setting, it deteriorates over time.
Yeah, it's like, I was thinking also, like, for example, ISIS. I don't want to talk about bad about ISIS over here, because we might get cut this part out. Never mind.
No,
I'm kidding.
But I don't think anyone in America
I know
disagrees that ISIS was.
No, I'm saying for them, they might come get us. They might come.
Good luck. I'll take my chances.
So yeah, I know. I think when ISIS was an example, like in the beginning, when they were like getting people from America, even people from America were going up, like seeing these brochures, and like getting inspired and enthusiasm.
The leader of ISIS grew up in the UK.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. Like these people, like they can totally get carried away with, how they're feeling. Like, okay, fine, like, oh, I'm believing that killing people is the best thing. Like for me, the best way to connect spiritually and everything. But like, it's pretty logical that that's not the way to go. So again, like it has to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very careful in this stuff, like your emotions and everything. It's you're walking on glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really think the moral is, and that to emphasize that there needs to be a harmony. Nobody's saying go become a robot, and nobody's saying go do shrooms.
Not nobody. Some people are.
Nobody, but there needs to be a harmony. That within the structure, you find your own personal connection. And really, that really, I think that also touches on freedom and what true freedom is. Because true freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. True freedom is the ability to say no to something. Say like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like a wild animal, a dog, for example, a wild dog cannot keep itself from eating 400 pounds of meat in front of it. You know what I mean? It's going to eat itself. It's going to eat it until it suffocates, But what separates us from animals is that we're able to be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, totally.
I have a certain level of control over myself, and that is true freedom. And so if you have these bounds, you can have freedom within those bounds.
Totally. It's a skill to be able to say no. it's a real it's a very difficult thing, to know when to say no, when not to say no. I was gonna bring this up later on with the kosher section of the parsha. And when it talks about what's kosher and what's not kosher, one of the birds that it mentions that's not kosher is the chasida, right? And the chasida in English, we think of chesed, right? So chesed in English is giving. I related to be selfless, right? That's the ideology of what is on top, what we see it as nowadays, right? Chesed. And so if you're just all chesed, right, like that animal, it's not kosher for a reason, right? You have to be able to say no. It's a very, very important thing. Later on in the parshas, in I think Kedoshim, Parsha Kedoshim, mentions by when they're mentions the type of relationships that are allowed, not allowed, in incestual relationship, what are the relationships mentioned there? Is that
those type of relations are not allowed?
Sadly. Thank God.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So we mentioned so how it mentions it there is that it's a chesed, meaning one of the words that's used there, the reasoning why it's not allowed is it's a chesed. In between, it's an act of giving without any boundaries, right? So there have to be boundaries upon what I'm doing, when I'm saying no to, what I'm saying yes to. It's a very it's again, I'm saying it's a skill. I remember being a kid and just whatever, I'll just help this person, help that person, and end up not helping yourself, right? There has to be a balance between that. Also, we were mentioned before, also is being able to help others is a big deal, and helping yourself also, right? It's a two-way street. So when to say no, when to say yes, even because things that you think is good. I think that helping people is great. I love helping people, right? But at the same time, there have to be times where I say, okay, I'm not able to help you right now. I need to go clean for Pesach. I need to do this or that. It's, I have a life also. It's an important thing. I think sometimes people take that out of context and they just say I need to be full in order to be able to help other people, and I need to, and we use it as an excuse sometimes to not help others. And it's a sad thing because they don't understand it's really a help to yourself. Not only that, in that as well, there is space for yourself. No one's being hopefully no one's being a fanatic and going out and just only being for others, right? There wouldn't be a way of life that way. People have to eat, have to sleep. It's an important thing in their lives. I think even leaders would understand that. They say the same thing. Even people that we think are giving the most still have to take for themselves as well. So yeah,
balance.
Yeah, exactly, balance. That's all it is.
So okay, so we talked a lot about Nadav and Avihu. I think maybe because we started talking about it a little bit, we could start talking about kosher, the laws of kashrut. So because I feel it relates, but this is a tough subject because question is why keep kosher? Why does it matter? And I think I want to preface that this is not to convince anyone to be kosher. I mean, I obviously that in my opinion that would be good, but if that's not where you're at, that's not where you're at. But at least maybe we could talk about why it's something to be considered, or why it may not, how it may possibly not be as crazy as you think.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess the first thing I would say about kosher is that I think that there's something to be said that your what you do physically has an impact on you spiritually.
100%.
And I was reading some articles about this, and I forgot who it was, but someone said something very, very interesting. It was talking about how before you can have mastery over yourself spiritually, you have to be able to have mastery over yourself physically. And I just find that really interesting. Think about the most refined people that you've met. It made me really think. The most refined people that I've met that kind of, have just unbelievable characters. You don't see the person, being a glutton or not having control over their physical desires, whether it be like food or the such, like,
Totally.
or the person being ill-mannered, when you think of someone that you respect and has great character, it almost, the good manners, good behavior is a prerequisite. And I think those are the basis of your physical actions.
100%. I think that's an amazing point, because I was actually just reading a book recently about like manners, and it was interesting. We don't really think about this, but what's behind the manners? Like, what's like the reason why we need to have manners, right? Really, the background of all of it, because manners they change based on where you are. Like some people in some places, like in Israel, have very different manners than in America, right? Or like in like India or in like China, like very different manners. These places totally different. You have to understand the culture, what they're into, how it works, right? And I think a part of that is because like it's all based on respect. That's really all the manners are. They're all respect for other people, how you relate to others, how they relate to you. How you want to like show yourself in this world, how like, you want to be with a person, understand like their needs and their shortcomings and your own shortcomings. It's all based on respect, right? And so I think that's why a big reason why you see those people that like you look up to, and you see like I find like I want to be like that guy, because like those manners are important to show other people who you are, right? Like I respect you because you're like a real being, like you're something that I respect because you're like a real thing, like you matter, like I'm not showing you like, oh, like you're whatever, like no, like this is like gold. I'm talking to gold, greater than gold right now.
No, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I just on that also, I wanted to mention it ties into like the emotions thing we were talking about before also, because to feel other people's emotions and to understand that also, like how other people are feeling, totally goes into like our everyday lives and like how we see other people, how we respect them. For example, like what was it? I was gonna mention about. I'm blanking out now. I was gonna mention about food. We're saying food. Foods are like considered in, at least in like the Talmud and in different writings of like.
The Talmud is the oral Torah.
Yeah, the oral Torah. It's a very like holy thing. Like even eating, the act of eating. There are certain people that would like. This is like a very high level. I don't like really didn't say we should do this, but people would like go in their own rooms and they wouldn't eat with people around them.
Wow.
And they'd like sit there and they'd make sure like no one was around them, because it's like it's a very sacred thing. It's a very, very like special moment. I think like feeding your body. For example, Nevi'im, the Rabbeinu Nisim, one of the early generations of like rabbis in like I think the 11th century, if I remember correctly. I think the 11th century mentions in one of his speeches that he would give. He mentions there that the Nevi'im, like the prophets, before they would do prophecy, whenever they would prophesize, before that, they would make sure to eat and have like a meal beforehand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So one of the things that you see like throughout the Torah and the Nevi'im and the prophets and the writings sections of the Torah, right? Throughout the whole thing, you see like, for example, what was it? I think it was Yitzchak or Yaakov. Someone before they were going to prophesize, they told their son. Yeah, they told Esav. They told Esav to go to get them food first. Right? You see that in the Torah. It mentions that. It's because they wanted to eat. And they had to eat before they started to prophesy. And part of the blessing that he was going to give to his son was a prophecy. As you see it as a common theme. It's like you have to have this aspect of feeding your body and your body being set and good in order to have that connection to anything, any spirituality, And they work very well like together. We can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I mean, we clearly have a connection between our soul and our physical bodies. I mean, no one can doubt that we don't have a soul, I mean, it's funny because I was reading this this book on the brain, and one of the most interesting things I read in the book was that scientists have no idea where our consciousness emanates in any regard.
Oh.
I mean, first of all, it's crazy to think about. I know this is kind of a tangent, but prior to, I think like 1985, which is what, like 30, 8 years ago, we literally had zero idea of the structure of the brain in any way. So like right now we talk about the prefrontal cortex and the temporal lobe and so on and so forth and whatever. We had no idea of these structures. The only way we knew about the brain was when people died prior to like, and the early 20th century we were lobotomizing people, which literally, do you know what that is? Yeah, literally was getting a nail into their brain and then like swishing the nail around. I'm serious.
I didn't know that was the process. Wow.
That was brain surgery like 100 years ago.
No.
And yeah, so I just said that to say that like we literally the study of the brain is so nascent right now, or nascent. I don't know if it's nascent or nascent. This happens to me a lot. Too many times. Let's see. Nascent. Wait, let's see. Nascent.
There we go.
Okay.
Good job.
So it's very nascent. And so yeah, we have no idea. My point is that we have no idea where consciousness emanates. And now I have no idea what. Oh, okay. So the reason I was saying all this was say that either way, we know we have a consciousness, and we know that it's rooted in our physical body. You know, so it's not so far-fetched, you know, that our physical body has an impact on our spiritual consciousness. The two are literally intertwined. And I also want to say there's this rabbi, his name is Rabbeinu Bechaye, and he brought up a very interesting point that it's naturally, there's a predominance of the physical. Because if you think about it, as children, our priority is the physical first. We're consumed by our physical wants and needs. Then eventually, as we become adults, our beings become more spiritual in the sense that we have the capacity to reflect and to exercise self-restraint, you know, which is really interesting, actually, that, you know, self-restraint is in the context of the spiritual. But it makes sense, because what is self-restraint? Taming our physical.
Wow, yeah.
So this is really interesting, what I want to talk about. But I just think it's an interesting perspective, because it talks about in the Torah, or like the commentary of the Torah, it talks about how not keeping kosher is the spiritual equivalent of losing your hearing. In the sense that when you're exposed to really loud, harsh noises, right? So first you lose your hearing to high frequencies, and then you lose your hearing to lower frequencies, but you don't notice that you can't hear those frequencies anymore.
Yeah, I have a great. I'm sorry.
No, please.
But yeah, I have a great. What's it called? One of my rabbis have told me this just recently. Actually, there's a good example for this. For example, a fly enters into a car. You know, the family's taking a road trip, and the fly gets into the car. He's hiding there in the corner until they get from Los Angeles to Texas, let's say. And he gets out in Texas, and the fly goes out. He has no the fly has no ability to understand where it is now. You know, it has no idea. So it's the same thing with us. Sometimes we can go somewhere, we go this place, that place in our spiritual identity, and we don't really understand how far we've gotten. You know, the world's a different place. Once you know, someone's tried a certain thing or not tried a certain thing or said no to something or said yes to something. It's a different world. You just switched everything. Everything's very different. You don't understand. You don't feel it, but it's a very different world now.
For sure. And no, I totally. That's also a really good analogy for it. And so I really think that there's something to be said about that. At least me personally, I felt it myself when I started keeping kosher. I kind of felt, I felt the change. I felt the difference. And, you know, ironically, this is based off me, so it might be total nonsense. But I was thinking about it, and I feel like it might, just based off what we were talking about, it might even just be the process itself of taking something as mundane as food, That's how we were talking about, and discerning, making decisions, saying like, no, I'm not going to eat this, and maybe I don't know why. And talks about a lot how we don't necessarily know the reasons behind kosher, but just that process, maybe there's something to that, like it connects you. That I don't know. I feel like that could be one of the things that like attenuates your spiritual antenna. Just it's a level of self-restraint, but for what purpose? You're doing it for your spiritual well-being. You're doing it with your spirituality in mind, and just that itself has an impact.
Yeah, wow. Just saying no is a big deal. As you're saying, that's what you're saying.
But why are you saying no?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not doing it because you're on a diet.
Yeah.
You're doing it for a spiritual reason.
Yeah, totally.
And just that itself, I feel like, shifts something in your consciousness.
Yeah.
But anyway, to go back to what we're talking about, Rabbi Sinclair was saying, who he was talking about, he was giving this example of hearing, how it's kind of like hearing, and he said the saddest kind of loss is the loss you don't even know about.
Wow.
Which is heavy. It's heavy.
Right.
So, not trying to like convince anyone to keep kosher, but I hope we like kind of showed how maybe you really can't see it until you try it, and it doesn't have to be strict. You could try it for a day, you could try it for a week, see how you feel, but I think the point is there's some value here. There's a rationale behind it.
Totally. And it's not about, I've always disliked how people people think about kosher, about like it being like rules and guidelines and like, oh, it's this, I always thought of it like, they're not just like rules and guidelines, like it's a standard, it's a standard. It's like I live up to this standard, and I won't be like, I don't want to like go lower because it would be a disrespect for myself, So I think that's the way I've always understood it, to see it like yourself, like it's a way of different outlook. I think instead of like seeing it restraining you, it's like not just putting you in chains, like it's again freeing you, So yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think for example, it's also just on the topic of eating, for example, when you start seeing eating as having a purpose, it connects that act, for example, with gratitude. You know what I mean? And it becomes a more refined, meaningful experience, and it just changes. It changes the way you go about how you live your life. And we were touching on this last week. I think it and we were talking about actually personally too. I think it just, if you live with purpose, if you feel like the things you do matters, that's, in my opinion, that's the ultimate form of self-respect, and so you could apply that to eating. If you eat with intention, not only is it you have self-respect, I feel like you even enjoy it more. You know what I mean? You're like, wow, you're the Snickers bar that you just like chowed down in 3 seconds, like instead of like you enjoy it more because you're feeling, wow, I'm grateful for this, like you're more mindful when you're eating it.
Totally.
And I feel like that you enjoy it more like that.
Yeah. One of the classes that I took while I was in learning in Israel, in yeshiva, one of the classes I took was meditation, right? And one of the days that we had, toward the end of the class, one of the classes we had was on meditation on food. So we would sit there, and we made the blessing on the food, and then we ate it, and we would just chew. Just feeling, closing our eyes, just feeling it, like understanding like the texture, all the feelings of like the actual food itself. And I've never like enjoyed eating that much in my life. It's like it's a different world. It's a different world. It really was. Like you don't understand even like what an orange tastes like when you're like actually paying attention.
A what?
An orange.
Oh, I think so. Okay, I think something else. Okay.
No, an orange, like the feeling of like having that in your mouth, or like also like whatever, like chocolate or whatever it is, like pop in your mouth. It's a different
whole different
feeling,
experience.
whole different world. I encourage everyone to try that out. That's oh, that's wonderful. It's a very eye-opening experience.
I bet.
And yeah, but I was saying also before, like eating is a very spiritual thing in Judaism. Very, very spiritual. It's very important, right? What you eat, why you're eating it. For example, like, are you just eating it to like, oh, let me just eat it and then go and like,
yeah,
whatever. No, it's everything. It's all for a purpose, right? Be mindful of that.
For sure. And as a matter of fact, eating is so important in Judaism. Not, for example, Shabbat, all the major holidays, they all revolve around eating and eating well.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's not. There's no. We've talked all so much about self-restraint and this and that, whatever. Like, no, enjoy your food.
Yeah, totally.
Feed your physical desires. Why? For what purpose?
Yeah.
What? And you know, it makes such a difference. It just makes such a difference, and it really reflects on you.
Yeah.
It really reflects on you and how much value you see in yourself, in my opinion. But go ahead, that we're told to do that. We're told to have magnificent meals on Shabbat or on Pesach or most major holidays besides Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
But the one time you're not
supposed to. Exactly.
Don't get it wrong, I do this. But yeah, so I think there's a rabbi, Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein, and he put it really well. Said one perspective is that when you think about it this way, you're no longer a body, but a soul clothed in physical garments.
Wow.
And I feel like that's such an important thing. Are we? And I don't even think you have to be spiritual to believe this, or be religious or observant or whatever. Are you your physical body or are you your soul?
Yeah, it's a big debate actually. It's a whole thing. It's like a debate, but it's a whole like different ideology. I remember this also. It's like, am I a body with a soul, or am I a soul with a body?
Yeah,
that's exactly what you're explaining.
It's such a huge thing. I think we innately know the answer. Yeah. In my opinion, I don't have any scientific basis to back it up, and I don't think it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, we feel it. We're not. I mean, we go to sleep. We have dreams. We're not this physical body. This is not us. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that. You don't need to be Shomer Shabbat to know that. You don't need to. You know.
It's common knowledge.
We know that. We feel it.
Yeah.
You know, and so we have to ask ourselves these questions.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So that's a huge discussion. I think that was a really productive discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? We really covered a lot of good topics.
Yeah, totally. We didn't go in order very much, but other than that,
it's okay.
We did great.
Okay. I mean, I guess we talked about so much about how important order and stuff is. Totally
in the parsha.
But no, we had a structure. We knew what we want to talk about, and we went about it based off the flow of the conversation. So look at us. We're doing it. We're practicing what we're preaching.
Now we should take. Now all we need to do is take shrooms.
Yeah.
Let's just take shrooms,
dude. We were waiting for the cameras.
Yeah, exactly.
We should honestly. I think that'd be more. That'd be more interesting.
Keep them on.
People would want to watch that instead. I know if I was listening, I'd rather watch that. So yeah, sorry to disappoint, guys.
Maybe next time. Do it next time.
We're full of surprises. You never know. But yeah, Ethan, seriously, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I feel blessed to have had you because it was really just by chance. You're not on the West Coast with us anymore, at least for now. So the fact that it just worked out to have you.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, this was great.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And I hope everyone took something away from this.
Definitely.
And yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you.